What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Well, here we are now beginning a new year, and this is our fourth meeting discussing step number 11. For those of you that are new and joining our group, about a year ago now, we decided that we were going to use these meetings to take an in-depth look at how the steps, working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, help us achieve emotional sobriety. So we've been, systematically and methodically going through all the 12 steps and really trying to put a magnifying glass on the steps and say, now, how is this step helping us achieve emotional sobriety? So those of you new say, well, what is emotional sobriety? Well, I think a couple simple definitions of it is that emotional sobriety restores our sense of personal agency, that I am the immediate cause of the actions that take place in my life, that my happiness, my sense of well-being is dependent on what I am doing. So the locus of control is within me. It's not in what's happening to me, it's in how I deal with what's happening to me. And Bill Wilson was very clear about this in writing the 12 and 12, is that if we work these 12 steps, of course, physical sobriety comes first, but the steps are designed to achieve emotional sobriety. So they are taking us through this what I would like to call the arc of our development, where we go from a very, very immature, undifferentiated state to starting to grow up, to starting to learn how to deal with life on life's terms. And the one big shift in our consciousness that's taking place as we do this is we're moving from depending on our environment to make us okay to figuring out the role that we need to play to make ourselves okay. That's what's happening with these steps. Our pivot point in this whole thing was steps 6 and 7, which really got us focusing on developing the best possible attitude we could develop in our lives. And I just love how this happens. The steps say, all right, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to develop the best possible attitude. And then the next step gets us focused on how we're going to do that. Steps 8 and 9 did that. Steps 8, we make a list of all people we had harmed, become willing to make amends to them. Step 9, make amends to them. So if I just paraphrase it, we look and we get honest with ourselves and figure out, what am I doing that is creating problems? How do I produce the trouble that I'm experiencing in my life? And then I start to do something about it. I go to clean these things up and take responsibility. So in steps 8 and 9 are about looking at our past, but we're not going to be able to achieve emotional sobriety by staying focused on our past. We have to bring what we're learning into the present. And that's what step 10 does. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So step 10 integrates into our daily lives what we learned in steps 8 and 9. So now this continues on, because I think step 11 is continuing on with how do we develop the best possible attitude towards our life. And so for those of you that are not familiar with step 11, I shall read it real quick, and then I want to focus on a certain aspect of it. If you have not listened to some of the previous recordings, we record the first half an hour my discussion and the discussion of the two discussants that come on after I talk for about 15 or 20 minutes, please go back. That information is already posted in the chat room. Thom has posted it for earlier episodes. Go to that link. So if you don't have that link, please copy that link. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. So this step is really focusing on improving our conscious contact. Last time I talked about that it's about expanding our consciousness, which I also equated to expanding our awareness. But I want to focus a little bit more on that today, about expanding our awareness. But before I do, I want to read from you. I want to read a paragraph from this step that Bill talks about, because he really, I think, puts this in a great context for us. He says on the top of page 98 in the 12 and 12 that there is a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. So I want everybody to hear that. There's a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. You see, for us to achieve emotional sobriety, we have to develop a practice of self-examination. And that practice of self-examination is grounded in self-awareness. You cannot look at yourself and examine yourself in depth as you are going to be asked to do so in terms of identifying how your emotional dependency has shown up in your life and wreaked havoc in it if you don't have an awareness of what you're doing and how you're doing it. He goes, there's a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit. So if we just focus on self-examination, powerful. Prayer, powerful. Meditation, powerful. All of these are powerful activities for us to engage in our personal development. But he goes, when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable, listen to the word, it's an unshakable foundation for our life. Emotional sobriety is becoming unshakable. Now, I say that absolutely, and it's never absolute, but it means if we get shaken, we can kind of get ourselves grounded again pretty quickly. So this is an unshakable foundation for our life. Now and then we may be granted a glimpse of the ultimate reality, which is God's kingdom, and we will be comforted and assured that our own destiny in that realm will be secure for so long as we try, however faultingly, to find and do the will of our own Creator. So I'm not going to go into the second half of that as much as I want to go into the first half. What is this direct linkage between self-examination, meditation, and prayer? And so I was asking myself that question today. Let me think about that. And I started to think that self-examination is based on the ability to take our awareness and focus that awareness on a specific issue in our life. So let's think of awareness of having two components to it, kind of a broad component. I can walk into a room and I could kind of get a sense of the color scheme in the room and what it looks like, and maybe even a sense of it. Do I like the room? Am I comfortable in the room? So I get kind of what I would call a broad experience of this room, right? We can even call that a composite of the room. But then I could focus on the picture that's hanging on the wall. And now my attention becomes focused on a component, on an element in that composite. And now when I focus on that picture in the room and I bring my awareness to that, all of a sudden now my awareness can go deeper. Instead of being broad, I can say, wow, how do I experience that picture? And if I really pay attention, I might even ask myself, what does that picture mean to me? What kind of a message do I see in it? How does that relate to experiences in my life? And now that picture becomes more important than anything that's going on in that room, because I'm focused on that and I'm having a relationship with that picture. And now that may take me into thinking about a childhood experience. It may get me in touch with something I'm struggling with right now. It may bring up some creativity in me that I get excited about. There are all kinds of possibilities, but it doesn't happen unless I focus my awareness. Prayer is to meditation what focusing is to awareness. I came up with that today. Prayer is to meditation what focusing is to awareness. And what focusing means is paying attention to. Now, I will just state briefly, what can we pay attention to? Where can our awareness be focused on? And what we know is there's 3 states of awareness. I can be aware in a composite, in a general sense, what's going on in my body, what's happening within me. I can feel maybe a tension overall in my body. I can also narrow that awareness down and say, what parts of my body are most tense? I could say I feel an excitement in my body. I could then narrow that down and say, where do I experience that excitement? How might I describe that excitement I'm feeling? So I can be awareness of what's happening within me. I can also be aware of what's going on around me. Like I can be in this room and kind of get a general sense of the lighting in the room I'm sitting with. I can see the screen that's in front of me. I can also now focus in on a specific aspect of that. I could look at the light that's in the room that's coming from the fan I have. I could take my awareness and focus on a specific thing. If I'm sitting with you, I could generally have a sense of you and look at you, but then I could look at your eyes, or I could focus on the tone of your voice. And that would have a certain meaning to me. Now, when I'm focused on me, what's happening within me physiologically, Raj, I think we'd call that proprioceptive awareness, right? What's going on within my body. I'm on safe ground. That's reality. That's my reality. What's happening for me right now in my body is my reality. When I look at your face and I see your face, and now I experience, let's say, a moistening of your eyes, or I hear your voice being raised, or I look at the color of your skin and I see the color of your skin changing, that's reality. Now, here's the third area where I can focus my awareness. What the heck does all that mean to me? Now I get into my imagination. Let's say I'm sitting talking to Susie and all of a sudden I'm saying something and her eyes water up. As a psychologist, my first thought is, boy, she must be touched by something going on. And I say, look, I'm aware that your eyes are watering up. She says, yeah, a fly just flew in it. God damn this thing. Now, how do I get this fly out of my eyes? Our imagination can take us off and interpret things that may or may not be true. Or she could be raising her voice. And I say, God, you must be really upset with me right now. She goes, no, I'm thinking about this. That's what's upsetting me. It has nothing to do with you. There you go again, Berger, making it all about you. It's not all about you, damn it. You know, when are you going to realize you're not the center of the earth? You know, something like that can happen between us. So my third area, when my awareness goes into my imagination, there can be trouble. It can also be a great source of information. I'm not throwing imagination down, I'm flushing it down the toilet, because it's also an amazing thing. And it can also help me tune in and get in touch with and connect to someone else. But where I got to watch out is where I start projecting some of my own issues into that imagination. And I start thinking that you're feeling towards me the way I feel towards myself. And I start seeing in you a rejection in me that's really my own rejection of myself. Or I start catastrophizing what's going to happen in the future. And I take my imagination into the future, and I my anxiety then fills the future with all these terrible things that are going to happen. Big trouble when I project all that stuff into the future. So when Bill says that if we take these things together, self-examination, prayer, and meditation, I believe what he's saying to us is that we can use those tools to get grounded. The more I deal with and I am aligned with what is happening in reality, in dealing with reality, the better I'm going to cope with it. And as soon as I start fantasizing and trying to make reality into what I think it should be and get lost in all of my expectations, as we've talked about, and that's where the self-examination, prayer, and meditation can help us look at some of our expectations, some of our supposed to, some of our shoulds, and get grounded in terms of what is. The more I am grounded in what is, the better I can cope. So with that, enough said, I will invite Dr. Shawn and Roger into the room with me and invite them to share whatever they'd like to share about this stuff. Roger, I'll invite you to go first if you wouldn't mind. And then Dr. Shawn will join you afterwards.
Wonderful. So good to see you, Dr. Shawn. Really good to see you. Welcome. Welcome. You're welcome. Wow. Al, thanks for that intro or those comments. It spurs a lot of thoughts for me. I remember one of my favorite spiritually oriented books, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. One of the things he says in that book is the beginning of spiritual growth, the beginning of spiritual development for us is when we begin to make our own consciousness the primary focus of our awareness in our life, rather than everything going on around us in the world. Not because everything going on around us isn't important. Of course it's important. But it's not until we begin this self-examination process that Alan was just talking about, that we begin to, that I, at least for myself and for so many friends and clients I've known over the years, that we begin to get a handle on our patterns, our ways of coping with life, our ways of coping with pain, our ways of expressing fear and anxiety, as well as ways that we try to seek joy and try to seek meaning or fulfillment. It's only through that process of starting to be curious about and look at my own patterns of reaction, my own ways I deal with my own emotions, the way I deal with other people's emotions, the ways I either connect to or distance myself from, what matters to me in my life. It's that self-examination process that begins to create the possibility for me of changing in ways that I most want to change, of feeling the feelings that I most want to spend time feeling in my life. So when Alan was talking about those 3 points of focus for our awareness, either internal, external, or into our imagination and fantasies, and I'm really glad he mentioned that imagination and fantasy can be put to tons of good uses in terms of problem solving, in terms of self-expression and artistic expression, all kinds of creative writing, on and on, right? But to me, it's about, am I balancing among those three possible orientations for my attention, do I have balance, or have I done the self-examination I need to do to realize that I have some powerful preferences, even rigidities, right? About I'm always like a very highly introverted and extremely self-focused in that sense of internally oriented person, or I'm a constant extrovert, right? I'm always geared toward other people and what's going on around me in my environment and paying attention to that. Or I'm living in my head all the time, which from my point of view in our culture is a huge bias that is strongly reinforced. We have some focus on somatic or body awareness in school. It's called physical education. Right? How much attention are we given over the course of our elementary, middle school, and high school educations on awareness of body, let alone awareness of emotions, right? Almost none. It's totally geared toward what? It's totally geared toward cognitive development, right? It's totally geared toward identification of ourselves with our mind, with our learning, with our accumulation of knowledge, not necessarily with problem solving, not necessarily with dealing with day-to-day life, right? So it's important to start to get a handle for oneself personally and for myself about, where our attention is going and where it might be good for us to develop more capability. Can I start to ground myself more in my body and still at times let my imagination roam, let my head be in the clouds, as we say, right? But at other times, can I let go of all that and just come down to my breathing and come down to an awareness of my body, an awareness of sadness I might be feeling, or annoyance I might be feeling, or frustration I might be feeling, or excitement and happiness I might be feeling. So that's kind of how I approach this. Is I was laughing when Thom was reading Bill's letter, and he said at 47 or 57 it becomes a very unworkable way of life. I would add 67 to that, because on any given moment, on any given day, that's still where my head's going, right? Is toward that adolescent state of mind, or toward a really immature level of seeing myself or other people or life. And to me, that's just part of life, every day, moment to moment. The difference is not so much that I feel a lot different all day long, or I see things a lot differently. The difference for me over the years is that I respond to my experience differently than I used to. That's the difference. I'm not as controlled or governed anymore, still sometimes, but I'm not as controlled or governed anymore by every feeling that grabs me and is intense, or every thought that comes to me that's really energized, or every defensive emotional reaction. I have a little more space than I used to have most of the time, not always, to have a little bit of reflection, before I speak, a little bit of reflection before I act. So that's some of what your comments tonight evoked for me, Alan. And I appreciate very much what you had to say. Shawn, what did Alan's comments bring up for you?
But, I started thinking about neuroscience and trauma-informed information. I think self-reflection is such an incredibly challenging thing for us to do. I always tell people I give myself a pass with my motto is the closer I am, the less I know. It's really easy for me to have a perspective when I'm looking at other people. But when it comes to myself, it's going to be hard to have that. I have blind spots. I have emotions. And if I'm in a fight and flight response, if I'm in a stress response, all my energy is going to the primal center of my brain. And in order for me to reflect, I need the front part of my brain, the modern part of my brain. And so when we pray and when we are meditating, we are doing an exercise to intervene in our nervous system. And it's interesting that we're talking about this today, because I was just studying in neuroscience about this new thing called neurotheology. which is a study of how our spiritual beliefs affect our neurology. And a neuroscientist said, it has been found that 12 minutes of daily focused prayer over an 8-week period can change the brain to such an extent that it can be measured on a brain scan. This type of prayer increases activity in brain areas associated with social interaction, compassion, sensitivity to others. It also increases frontal lobe activity as focus and intentionality increases. So the new polyvagal theory talks about like our nervous system. I think of it like a traffic light. You have the green light, which is where you feel when you're safe and it's peaceful. And when you're there, you get perspective, you're creative, you're engaged with other people. But then the yellow light's that fight flight. You're fighting the tiger, running from the tiger, and the red light is freeze. I'm preparing to die. In order for us to reflect, we need to be in that green light zone. And this means that we have to work through that trauma. And what many people don't know is when we have trauma, we don't have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan. When people say, what do you want to do in your future? Your mind goes blank. We didn't have the luxury to imagine those things when you're surviving. And so in this step, they're saying we need to learn how to master regulating our nervous system so that we can get a perspective that we have been unable to get due to the survival and the chaos and the trauma that we've been engaging in. And so it is a tool to use to regulate the nervous system. And research shows that when we do that, we literally change our brain. It's so hopeful. And so when you said like it creates a permanent foundation, neurologically, it literally does. It literally is rewiring your brain. You're building new cells, new pathways. And this is the hope that we are finding in neuroscience. So prayer is a very powerful tool that can give us a perspective that we're just unable to get. And it really is a lifetime journey. I'm sure I'll be learning things till the day I die. Like I'll be sitting there and go, oh, I just had an epiphany. Oh. Right? So, I mean, it's just going to happen this way. So, you know, when I hear a lot of like right now people say like what create your goals and have all this insight. And I just think that it's, you know, being a shame specialist, it really sets people up for shame because they think, why can't I do that? Why can't I think that? Why don't I have insight? Why don't I have this perspective that people are telling me? And that's just part of that healing journey, is to free up the energy and space of the brain. And meditation prayer is really going to be a powerful tool to get there.
Wow. Thank you, Shawn. Wonderful focus and articulation. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And when you said attention, I think we have a saying that we don't control what we see, but we control where we put our attention.
That's right.
Right.
So it's training the brain to have that focus. And the only way we can do that is with repeated practice over time.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. You know, the first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. You know, we're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.